I don't know when we're going to finish this movie. We could finish it if I get fired.
We thought we were going to be there for the rest of our lives.
Oh, this is the end. Like, we're going to sink the boat and then we can go home.
Every single day, the shark would malfunction.
I had consistent nightmares about directing Jaws for years afterwards.
All right, people, let's do this one last time. If there's one movie widely known for its troubled production, it has to be Jaws. Steven Spielberg's masterpiece was an odyssey of challenges and hardships upon the unpredictable ocean. An incomplete script, dueling actors, sinking ships, hostile islanders, and a notoriously unruly shark almost as diabolical as the one on screen. From stem to stern, it is film history's most legendary shit show.
It's a tiger shark.
A what?
In 1973, film producers David Brown and Richard Zanuck purchased the rights to an unreleased manuscript called Jaws. Written by Peter Benchley, the novel details a small island town terrorized by a massive great white shark and the three men who hunt it down. The producers saw the potential of a big movie and didn't bother considering the how of it all. With the purchase came the agreement that they had to offer the director's chair to someone represented by the same agency as Benchley. This led them to a new young director with only one feature film under his belt, offering him the chance of a lifetime. A movie that could change his life. That man was Dick Richards.
I'll never forget it. The guy said, I have a clear vision of starting the picture. We're underwater, and then we come and we see the town. And then the whale jumps out. And so Benchley looked at him for a long time, we all did, and said, you mean the shark?
3 times Richards called it a whale, and Benchley vetoed the director hard and fast. Luckily, they had another new young director with only one feature film under his belt who actually wanted the job, Steven Spielberg. Starting in the mid-1960s came a new wave of extremely promising filmmakers from USC, the likes of Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and George Lucas. This film school generation were redefining cinema, and Brown and Zanuck drew upon that talent early on when they hired Steven Spielberg to make Sugarland Express. They loved working with a then 26-year-old, a gifted and friendly kid who was less interested in artistic merit and more about making entertaining crowd pleasers. He saw Jaws as a spiritual sequel to his made-for-TV film Duel, about a relentless, murderous antagonist that's rarely seen. He wanted a film on the open ocean, not in a tank on the studio backlot with a static painted backdrop. And he didn't want it to star any household names because their celebrity baggage could distract audiences from believing their characters. His passion for what he could do with the novel was infectious and refreshing to the producers. After signing on, however, Spielberg started to get cold feet. Then Sugarland failed at the box office. For months experiencing an identity crisis, he debated leaving Jaws, worried that he was selling out. He contemplated injuring himself so he'd be physically incapable of directing.
I don't know, Chief. I don't know. He's very smart and very dumb.
When 20th Century Fox came knocking, asking him if he wanted to take on their film, Lucky Lady, Spielberg considered it in earnest, as he wanted to make a film rather than what he considered Jaws, a movie. The producers talked him off the ledge, saying how he could elevate this movie, and it would be his ticket to make all the films he wanted. Universal also threatened to sue him for breach of contract if he left. Obviously, the biggest hurdle for the filmmakers was, how the hell were they going to make a larger-than-life great white shark? They first foolishly assumed they could train one like a dolphin. Since that was never going to happen, they hired an Australian documentary crew to film great whites in the wild. To artificially make the shark seem larger, the plan was to put a short stuntman, standing in as Richard Dreyfuss's character Hooper, in a shark cage. However, before he could get in, a great white attacked the cage in such a dramatic fashion, the filmmakers decided the footage was too good not to use in the movie. And Hooper's fate was altered from the book to surviving the encounter. But the rest of the shots were limited at best. Production designer Joe Alves had a plan.
Steven and I, sort of in a naive way, said, you know, we're not going to do any miniatures. We're going to do this thing full size out in the real ocean.
Alves designed a 24-foot robotic shark, given an extra foot in the movie for dramatic effect.
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons on him.
But he needed help to actually pull it off and knew exactly who to call. Bob Mattey was Walt Disney's mechanical effects wizard, from Mary Poppins to the Love Bug. But Alves wanted him specifically because of his work on the giant squid from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Mattey was retired, but the challenge was too enticing to pass up. Alves and Mattey constructed 4 mechanical devices for Bruce the Shark, nicknamed after Spielberg's lawyer. 2 were sea sled sharks, towed behind a boat capable of rising and lowering with compressed air. 1 was simply the fins for wide shots. The other was a full-sized replica with very little articulation. The other 2 were fully animatronic behemoths. Knowing they'd have to fix things on the fly, they were made with opposite uncovered sides for ease of access. Depending on the angle of a shot, the corresponding shark, with its camera-ready side showing, was used. These 2 would be mounted onto a double-jointed crane arm that slid back and forth across a 65-foot steel platform. This platform needed a shallow area with a smooth, sandy ocean bottom, roughly 30 feet down, to hide it. And it also needed to be placed beyond the sight of any landmass to maintain the illusion of isolation. The filmmakers chose Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts.
So Martha's Vineyard was chosen less because it was a very picturesque village. It was because of that sandy bottom, 12 miles offshore. It is very important that no matter what direction my cameras turned, I didn't want to see land. My fear was the minute the audience saw land, they'd say, look, this is getting pretty intense out here. Just turn the boat around and go toward that land that we keep seeing in your movie. I wanted the audience to feel very cut off, like they couldn't just run back to shore because there was no shore to run back to.
In early 1974, Jaws the novel hit bookshelves to mixed reviews but was an instant commercial success. Wanting to capitalize on that popularity while also avoiding a feared actors' strike starting on July 1st, Universal moved the shooting date up to early spring.
The studio said, we're going to start shooting this movie in the next month. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I have a year and a half to build the shark. No, you don't. We're going to start shooting because the book's so popular. That's all they care about, is the money. They don't have any idea what we're doing, how complicated it was. No. So Steven got him to postpone it until May.
Alves and Mattey packed up and shipped the untested sharks to New England. Not only was Bruce not ready, the script wasn't finished either. Per Benchley's contract for selling the rights to his novel, he had the first stab at writing the adaptation. Working with Spielberg, he wrote 3 drafts, removing multiple subplots from the book. Like Chief Brody's wife having an affair with Hooper because the producers wanted a straight adventure film, and Spielberg didn't want the 2 characters rooting for the other to die. Despite conquering what would resemble the finished film's structure, Benchley felt out of his depth and stepped aside. A few other screenwriters came and went, with the last coming from playwright Howard Sackler, who added the USS Indianapolis speech, but denied receiving an on-screen credit. Still, Spielberg felt the script was too dour, stating publicly that they needed to fix Benchley's unlikable characters. Benchley bit back, calling Spielberg nothing more than a destined second-unit director. They worked it out before his cameo. Spielberg then gave the script to his friend Carl Gottlieb, a comedy TV writer, instructing him to eviscerate it. Gottlieb shared his thoughts, but with filming less than 2 weeks away, Spielberg invited him to help rewrite dialogue on location as they filmed. Filming began on May 2nd, 1974, set for 55 days of shooting. The first day they put Bruce in the Atlantic, he sank to the ocean floor. On their second attempt, all of the electronics fried.
Well, the first mistake with the shark was they made a big mistake and they built it for fresh water. Now, they all knew we were going to the Atlantic Ocean, but for some reason they built it for fresh water.
What's the difference?
Well, electrolysis is a major problem when you get salt into all the machinery, into the electrical system.
Sure.
With electrical not an option and fearing oil spilling into the ocean with hydraulics, the only other option was pressurized air via a pneumatic system. But this meant the effects team needed much more time to retrofit and test, forcing Spielberg to delay any shark filming until they were ready. At first, this wasn't a problem because Spielberg would soon get behind schedule, thanks to his slow-moving perfectionism and the film not having a finalized script. Every night at dinner, Spielberg, Gottlieb, and the actors would discuss the scenes for the next day and improvise back and forth until the dialogue felt natural. Then Gottlieb would type it up to be handed out the next morning. Flying, or sailing, by the seat of their pants, improv was the name of the game in nearly every scene. be it Quint's sea shanties or Brody's son mimicking his movements. Gottlieb, who also played the town's journalist, a big part in the book, knew as they went along that his character served less and less of a purpose, so he willingly gave himself less and less to do in service to the story. For the famous but as of yet unfinished Indianapolis monologue, it took the shark hunter himself, Robert Shaw, to pull it together.
And Steven was nervous about it, I don't blame him, and he asked all his writer friends to take a pass, not only John Milius, but Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale and Paul Schrader, but there was like 10 versions of that speech, including my own. We gave them to Robert Shaw. Robert Shaw knows his way around a typewriter. He took it all, synthesized it. He came to dinner with a handful of paper and said, I think I've got that pesky speech licked.
If starting the movie without a locked script or a shark wasn't bad enough, Martha's Vineyard wasn't going to make it any easier. Mirroring the book and the film, the local government of the island didn't want the drama of a shark ruining their summer tourist season.
You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Fearing Hurricane Hollywood would spoil the quaintness of their community, they tangled any planned set or shooting location in red tape with committees and permits and hearings, constantly asking the filmmakers how they intended to destroy the island. They even handed Joe Alves a cease and desist because the film's Boatyard production house wasn't properly zoned for making movie props. Alves attempted to play ball, but as the case climbed up to the state level, he discovered they'd only be fined $50 per day for non-compliance. Production decided to just eat the cost and proceed.
Get the mirror off my back so I don't have any more of this zoning crap.
Residents, on the other hand, didn't mind as much.
With wealthy Hollywood people on the way, local merchants can be forgiven for raising their prices a little.
And open auditions didn't hurt either, with most of the cast played by townsfolk. While they had a blast filming the Armada scene, some a little too much with one drunken fisherman throwing real dynamite, those who were extras weren't exactly happy about playing in the not yet warm waters of June. But as filming dragged on, there was a groundswell of people who weren't subtle about how sick they were of these outsiders. From Jaws Go Home signs and price gouging shopkeepers to slashed tires and dead sharks left at the steps of the producer's office. There was even a labor strike by the Vineyard's boat captains, since no one from LA was able to operate the ships effectively. So Universal agreed to repair or outright replace their ships used for production. Ultimately, though, the Jaws crew had to head out onto the open ocean, alleviating the amount of congestion and people swarming their small towns.
And we gotta do it quick. I don't bring back the tourists, and to put all your businesses on a paying basis. But it's not gonna be pleasant.
Each day filming at sea included at least the film's ill-fated orca, a camera platform, a flat vessel dubbed the SS Garage Sail, as it was loaded with every tool, spare part, and piece of equipment they frequently needed, and a fleet of life rafts as go-betweens. At first, the unseaworthy Hollywood crew assumed they'd simply sail out and begin shooting.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies.
Within seconds, the unforgiving ocean would part their flotilla in separate directions, undoing all of their prep. It took local marine mechanic Lynn Murphy, the unsung hero of Jaws, to teach the crew about anchoring each ship at 4 different points to keep the boats stationary. When someone mistakenly screwed an eye bolt into the orca's hull for extra anchorage, it sprung a leak. Thanks to quick thinking from Murphy, he saved the ship, and Universal deemed him invaluable and hired him full-time. Anything boat-related went through him to determine its feasibility, and it was a lot. Between his aquatic know-how, Bob Mattey's ingenuity, and Joe Alves' practicality, Spielberg had a dream team of problem solvers, which was an absolute must because production would quickly become less about filming actors and more about the constantly revolving door of solving problems. Jaws was without a doubt punching above its weight for what was technologically possible for 1974.
We were pioneers, and that's the best word I can think of. And we didn't have enough testing time. And on Bob Mattey's behalf, if we had given him the 15 weeks that it took to work the bugs out of the shark, it would have worked on cue.
With the shark out of commission and needing to shoot something, Spielberg and Gottlieb had to get creative, so they expanded everything beyond what was initially scripted. From lighter moments like Hooper and Shaw's sparring sessions, to mounting tension through fishing lines or falling cranes. However, their biggest change that allowed the film to keep going in the absence of a shark was having Shaw spear the beast with flotation barrels, fundamentally altering the monster's presence in the film. But eventually, production reached a standstill. With every possible scene with the actors, the orca, or barrels covered, they needed a shark. It was finally time for Bruce's close-ups.
Hello?
They started with a full-sized sea sled shark, which was by no means an easy task, from breaking under the weight of the current or smashing into the side of the orca. But it didn't require the incessant hand-holding of the dual animatronic monsters atop the moving crane platform. The 12-ton steel stage was slowly lowered to the ocean floor via airbags. If they pumped too much air on one side, the whole thing would flip over and would need to be dug out, which is exactly what happened the day the studio paid a visit. Once leveled in the sand, none of those 4 anchors from the multiple ships could cross over it. Then one of the 2 mechanical sharks was towed out in a floating frame, meant to keep it steady while they attached it to the crane arm and the pneumatic tubing that led to the garage sale, where upward of 14 men would operate Bruce. And since those hoses were full of air, they had to be weighed down. Once everything was set, then the real pain began. Still not ready for primetime, the sharks proved to be more of a whack-a-mole of constant troubles. When the tail worked, the jaw would malfunction. The creature would hit its mark, but the skin would rip off. The longer they were out there, the more water it absorbed and the heavier it got, putting more pressure on the controls and crane arm. Overworked engines stalled, pieces broke off, forever lost, and the tubing would spring leaks, causing the whole system to fail. They fixed what they could out at sea, but every night the sharks needed to be hauled in, patched up, and repaired, only to be broken the next day.
Sorry about Bruce, mate. He's really a nice guy.
The crew started calling the film flaws, and Bob Mattey's team special defects. Even when everything was leveled, sturdy, and functioning, the ocean would say otherwise, be it inconsistent lighting, intermittent rain, heavy winds, strong waves, or local sailors circling around them hoping to get a glimpse of the shark. Then there were the problems no one anticipated, like how the boats towing the barrels or sea sleds had to be far away enough that the cameras didn't pick up their wake, or how the crane platform required constant cleaning as debris and sea life would bury itself inside the gears, or how long it took for private yachts to leave the horizon.
And I'd sit there saying, okay, do I wait here for an hour for the regatta to pass, or do we turn 18 to 25 anchors, move everything to look in this direction? And we used to do calculations and say, let's wait for the sailboats to move out of the shot. And it just was frustrating for all of us.
For 2 months, they did this, 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. Hollywood is the poster child for the adage, hurry up and wait, but this was ludicrous.
On a good day, I get 5 shots. On an average day, about 3. On a bad day, none.
Between the shark fixes and the disruptive sailboats, the cast and crew spent literal hours each day lying about, accomplishing nothing. To pass the time or fight the cold water, alcohol became a frequent refuge, with Robert Shaw being a particular connoisseur. In fact, the crew had to hide booze from him because when he was 3 sheets to the wind, they'd have to call it a day. He practically blacked out attempting his Indianapolis monologue.
I've always felt that there's certain details and war stories that we all have about our movies that I shouldn't really deeply go into, but suffice to say that at about half an hour into that, I sent him back home, and where he slept it off and called me the next morning, and he was terrified that something terrible had happened that day, and that he kept saying, did I embarrass you? Please, I hope I didn't embarrass you. And I told him, no. I said, whenever you're ready, we'll do it again. So the next day he came prepared, completely sober.
And it was one for the record books.
So 1,100 men went in the war. 316 men come out. The Sharks took the rest June the 29th, 1945.
With all the interruptions, the listless cast and crew needed ways to amuse themselves.
No, we all have different methods. I do tend to drink when totally bored.
Roy does exercises, Roy Scheider, and sunbathes. Scheider does that, and Dreyfuss talks. Dreyfuss just talks.
Much has been made of the feud between Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss. Shaw's son wrote a whole play about it, because Shaw could get under Dreyfuss's skin, and brutally so.
He really thought Dreyfuss needed a slapping down. Young punk with no stage experience. Look at you, Dreyfuss. You eat and you drink and you're fat and you're sloppy. Your age, it's criminal.
And in private, he was the kindest, gentlest, funniest guy you ever met. Then we'd walk to the set, and on the way to the set, he was possessed by some evil troll who would then make me his victim.
It was all fun and very mean games. That is until Dreyfuss tossed Shaw's glass of bourbon overboard, and Shaw retaliated by blasting him with a fire hose.
That thing hit me right in the face, and it's the only time in the entire film that I lost my sense of humor.
Won't have to take this abuse much longer.
As time went on, for those involved, they knew it was an old school acting ploy by Shaw to get Dreyfuss in the mindset of their character's animosity. And not once did Shaw attempt to test Roy Scheider, a former pro boxer. Dreyfuss called their so-called rivalry overblown, especially as many have hyped it up over the years. As he said, one bad day on set does not a feud make. That said, for those 2 months, there were lots of bad days on set. Lacking sea legs in close quarters, the filmmakers stumbled around and fell into the drink. And there was never enough room, leading to an oft-repeated phrase directed at the producers: "We're gonna need a bigger boat," which is where that line came from. Tempers flared, seasickness hit everyone, and people had breaking points. Shaw said the script was a piece of shit. Dreyfuss went on television to say how terrible the film would turn out.
It is not Steven's fault or anyone's fault. It is the fault of Universal Studios giving this film an arbitrary May 2nd start date, that the script was never together.
And Scheider snapped, staring at another subpar catered lunch, and took hours to calm down. He also accidentally speared Joe Alves instead of the shark, knocking him out. Then an air of paranoia arose among the crew that some were deliberately sabotaging equipment because they liked the contractual triple pay for going over schedule. Even the orca had had enough. During the scene where the shark is tied to the fishing vessel, the boat tugging the orca pulled too hard and ripped an entire plank out of the ship. As it sank, again, life rafts rushed in, prioritizing the actors over the camera and sound guys who were holding the non-waterproof equipment.
I remember John Carter, who won an Academy Award, by the way, for Jaws. He picked up the Niagara. He was on the boat and held over his head and said, "F*** the actors, save the sound department."
The orca was rushed to shore, barely making it. The audio recorder survived, but one camera did not. Cinematographer Bill Butler figured seawater and developing solution were similar enough that the reel of film could be saved.
We got on an airplane with a bucket of water and the film in it and took it to New York and developed it and didn't lose a foot.
When things went wrong, it was easy to point at the 27-year-old piloting the ship. The kid, as the crew called him, was personable, collaborative, and although on the inside he was a ball of anxiety, chewing through his fingernails, getting it from every direction, he never caved to the pressure or blew up at his team.
I thought it was going to be a cakewalk, but I didn't know anything about tides or currents. I didn't know about how the wind affects the water, how the color of the sky changes the color of the water, or how you can't get anything to match. It was one nightmare, worst-case scenario after the other. I didn't think we'd ever finish. I had just assumed I'd be fired off the picture.
Brown and Zanuck perhaps debated firing Spielberg, but they couldn't dislike the smart, affable director, nor the footage he was delivering. And the head of Universal, Sid Sheinberg, may have considered shutting it all down, but Spielberg had an ace in the hole. Lorraine Gary, who played Chief Brody's wife, and was Sheinberg's actual wife. Whether a simple coincidence or some cruel calculation on the part of Spielberg during casting, he knew Sheinberg wouldn't pull the plug on his wife's breakout role.
Well, I've got to presume that Sid's job had something to do with the fact that I was considered for this movie. I don't like considering it, but that seems real. He and Steven were friends at that point, and Sid was sort of his mentor.
When Sheinberg flew in to assess the damage, he gave Spielberg an off-ramp to let him cut and run entirely. For all his hesitations before production, Spielberg's resolve was now unwavering. He believed in Jaws, and he was going to finish it. The producers then laid out a doomsday scenario, pausing filming till after the high-priced tourist season, giving them more time to fix the shark and possibly relocating to the Bahamas or Africa.
We're shutting down production. Yeah, well, we only have $1,000 left anyway.
Oh, there's a $1,000 leaving town tax.
Then on August 21st, just before making that call, Bruce started working. Inelegant and still troublesome, but consistent. At last, a windfall. With a mostly stable shark, they could start filling in the holes of their picture. A cake was made in celebration. As they filmed, editor Verna Fields radioed from the island, detailing each shot Spielberg needed to capture to maintain continuity. Suddenly, it was coming together. Shortly after, for the climax of the film, they moved production to Katama Bay, where it was sheltered from the chaos of the open ocean, was easier and faster to get to, and made sense story-wise why the Orca was closer to land. It became a sprint to decisively put an end to this odyssey.
Show me the way to go home, I'm tired and I want to go to bed.
The entire company had developed a foxhole mentality, behaving like troops in the line, experiencing battle fatigue, nervous exhaustion, and incipient alcoholism. There were more fights, more threats, and all the while the good townies of the Vineyard were stealing us blind, putting water in the gas tanks of the Orca, overcharging for every amenity, and behaving less hospitably every day. No one was sorry to see the summer end. On the last night with the cast, Scheider and Dreyfuss, needing a cathartic release, started a full-on food fight with the whole crew. All that remained was the finale. As Spielberg set up the shot of the heroes paddling to shore, he caught wind that the crew planned to throw him into the bay to celebrate finishing. Instead, he called action, then boarded a boat headed back to the mainland. With no one calling cut, the crew turned around as Spielberg shouted, "I shall not return," and sped off onto the horizon. Then his boat got tangled in a lobster net and he needed to be rescued. Par for the course. In Boston, the night before his flight back to Los Angeles, the even-keeled Spielberg finally broke.
I had a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't get a full breath of air. I kept going to the bathroom and splashing water on my face. I was shaking. And I was out of it. I was completely out of it. And I think it was everything that I had experienced on the island, at least trying to not only hold myself together, but hold the crew together. I had just a great crew, and yet I felt responsible for everybody there. And I felt really responsible for keeping them there for as long as we had to stay. And I think I just lost it.
Gone and not coming back, there were still a handful of interstitial shots remaining and were either directed by Joe Alves or Verna Fields. On September 17th, Alves filmed the head of Bruce, the endlessly aggravating shark, being blown to smithereens.
Smile, you son of a...
It was a wrap on Martha's Vineyard. Joe Alves, Bob Mattey, Lynn Murphy, and what was left of the special defects held a party, and most couldn't help but cry in disbelief.
I used to hate the water. I can't imagine why.
But the film wasn't done. After a 3-week breather, in LA they did eventually film in a tank, mostly finishing the shark cage sequence and reshooting the discovery of the half-sunken boat. Then, Jaws finally wrapped on October 6th, 1974. 104 days over schedule. By the time they left the island, Verna Fields had about 2/3 of the film already edited, but the last act was like a jigsaw puzzle. 2 consecutive shots in the final film could have been filmed months apart. The shark approaching the Orca could have been from September, but the actors reacting to it could have been in a film canister from June. Oftentimes, when the shots were placed together, the lighting wouldn't match. So they did their best to chemically color correct it when they developed the strips of film. Remember, this was the pre-digital age.
You got any better suggestions?
They also had conversations about how much of the shark they should actually show. They only shot a third of what was storyboarded for Bruce, and Spielberg floated the idea of adding more documentary footage of real sharks. In the end, he and Fields determined it best to largely hide the creature until the last act. After the first preview, which Spielberg watched on Valium, worried people would laugh at his shark the same way his crew did, one audience member told them not to change a thing as it would ruin how perfect it was. Regardless, Spielberg thought it could be better, asking Universal for extra reshoots, wanting inserts of the orca's hull being smashed from the inside, and redoing the head found underwater. Jaws had already tripled its original $3.5 million budget. They said, enough is enough. So of course he secretly stole some company cameras and filmed said sequences in Verna Field's pool, while she tightened the edit even further, so they could get a PG rating. The last piece was John Williams, using the two most effective notes in film score history.
I thought it was a joke when Johnny played that for me on the piano at his house, and he goes, da-dun, 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 dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I started laughing. Because I knew Johnny had a sense of humor, but he never teased me before.
Sensing something special, Universal flooded television with ads, to a degree never attempted before.
Jaws. See it before you go swimming.
They also elected not to have a slow rollout of the film, allowing it to build buzz over weeks and months, and instead chose to have it debut everywhere all at once. A tactic at the time usually reserved for stinkers that studios pushed out quickly to recoup their costs before the bad word of mouth hit. Jaws tore through 490 theaters on June 20th, 1975, and proceeded to empty the beaches and fill the theaters. Reviews were predominantly positive at the time. Some called it manipulative, but since then, it is widely considered a masterpiece. Terrifying, engrossing, funny, unforgettable. Between the rich characters and the explosive thrills, many would agree it's the rare example of when the movie is better than the book. It was #1 at the box office for 14 straight weekends. And by the end of its second, the movie already paid for itself. Passing The Godfather in 2.5 months, it became the highest grossing film in history, then continued to do twice that, topping out at $260 million during its initial run. With multiple re-releases over the years, the film has amassed nearly $500 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's just shy of $3 billion in 2025, making it the 7th highest grossing film of all time. It tapped into the cultural zeitgeist like no other film before it. The world's first blockbuster. When that year's Academy Awards were announced, Spielberg hired a TV crew to film his reaction live, so assured he'd get nominated for Best Director.
And Jaws is about to be nominated in 11 categories. You're about to see a sweep of the nominations. We're very confident at this very moment. Oh, I didn't get it. I wasn't nominated. I got beaten out by Fellini. Only for what?
Best Picture, Best Editing, Best Score, and Sound. And that's it.
That's it? Best screenplay?
Nothing. Not even special effects.
Not even special effects? This is called commercial backlash.
Jaws did win Oscars for Best Sound, Best Score, and after months of an unfounded rumor circled Hollywood that Verna Fields saved Jaws in the edit, she won Best Editing. As she said, she got a lot of credit for Jaws, rightly or wrongly. Starting to believe the scuttlebutt, a jealous and bitter Spielberg spiraled, questioning how she could be the sole recipient of an award that was part of a collaborative process. The Wunderkind was finally showing his age. When he said no to Jaws 2, the less said about the sequels, the better, he heard that Fields was offered the director's chair, and Spielberg reneged his decision in spite. But unable to come up with an idea worth pursuing, he quit a few weeks later.
Well, when I first hear the word Jaws, I think because I was younger, I was more courageous, or I was more stupid. I'm not sure which. So when I think of Jaws, I think about courage and stupidity. And I think of both of those things existing underwater.
The lasting legacy of Jaws is a complicated one.
Now, why the shark works so well here every day and I couldn't get the damn thing working for 2 months in Martha's Vineyard in '74, I'll never know.
It's a classic in every sense of the word. It launched the career of the most successful director in history and started the summer movie craze. But shark trophy hunting became a legitimate problem, something Benchley and Spielberg fully regret. And the movie is accused of ushering in everything still wrong with Hollywood blockbusters. From studios being rewarded for unnecessary, chaotic productions, to spending more on less risky projects. Yet its turbulent production also created a demand to know more about making movies. Shortly after the film's release, Carl Gottlieb wrote the Jaws log, a month-by-month tell-all chronicling the making of the film, every hurdle, mishap, and triumph. Gottlieb, smartly, understood that for a film this big, this singular, it would inspire the next wave of filmmakers. So he wrote the novel detailing not only how Jaws was made, but how films are made in general. And sure enough, the book was a hit. And countless artists in the industry, past and present, consider it a filmmaking Bible. It is arguably one of the foremost pillars of why the genre of behind the scenes exists. A tradition of pulling back the curtain on your favorite films and TV shows. But sometime after the rise of streaming services and social media, a shift happened. The recent trend by studios, directors, and Tom Cruise is to claim that no CGI was used in their work. Be it deceptive quotes, tampering with actual behind-the-scenes footage, or omitting the painstaking work of visual effects artists in special features.
They are keying out all of the blue screen and replacing it with what appears to be practical set pieces to avoid the stigma of having visual effects in your film.
By hiding these details, they have inadvertently cultivated a generation of the misinformed and the media illiterate, who believe that computer effects are inferior to the old ways, when in reality, no CGI is really just invisible CGI.
The entire CGI versus practical debate is something the audience has invented out of sheer ignorance about how movies are made.
But one has to ask, why does it matter? If you were entertained, impressed, amazed, or didn't even notice, the artists did their job and you enjoyed your time. It's called movie magic for a reason. Throughout the making of Jaws, the filmmakers, like any magicians, were adamant that the shark remain a secret from the press so audiences wouldn't know their tricks before seeing the film. But they never outright lied by saying the shark was real. They didn't need to because it didn't matter. People believed it.
Shark still looks fake.
And for many, it sparked a fascination with how it was done. And for the most part, there have been avenues to learn these tools of the trade. Magazines like Fangoria and Cinefex revealed secrets. TV specials got us hyped, and documentaries from Heart of Darkness to 6 Days to Air put a human face on the struggles. Then it truly peaked during the age of DVDs, where exceptional special features like those of Lord of the Rings or the Alien Anthology laid out everything to an exhausting yet spectacular degree. And it didn't detract from those films. In some cases, like Jaws, it enhances repeat viewings, knowing how difficult it really was. Today, popular videos like ending explainers and Easter egg breakdowns are no more than people wanting to know filmmakers' intentions. All the more proof that even in the YouTube era, people have an insatiable desire to know how movies and television get made. Because making stuff is hard.